Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chan.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing 1917, which came out in New Zealand this year, and Birdman, with a subtitle about ignorance and something else, rather. What is it? Birdman and the
unexpected something or of ignorance. Well, this is it. We're ignorant about it, and that's entirely applicable.
So clearly that name's a fail. Birdman, which came out in...
Hold up. Oh, the unexpected virtue of ignorance.
Well, there you go. So we're virtuous. Which
makes
came out
sense.
in...
2014.
2014?
Yeah.
The great year of 2014.
Yes.
What a year for movies.
Amazing.
Cool. And the connection being that they are both films that have a continuous shot as a key feature of their structure and style.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So, I am going to hand this over first to Sarah to hear about 1917.
So 1917 is a World War I movie directed by theatre and film director Sam Mendes. It does a delightful thing by putting at the centre of it two young lance corporals, Blake and Schofield, who are played by, I would like to say, relative newcomers, George Mackay and Dean Charles Chapman. And the two lads are sent off on a perilous mission through no man's land and into enemy territory to deliver a key message to another British battalion that ought to save lives.
Brilliant. And William, Birdman.
So, Birdman is directed by the great Alejandro González Iñárritu, who has done some really cool stuff. And I think this is a real meta tale of a character played by Michael Keaton, who, 30 years ago starred in some amazing high-budget, high-grossing superhero movies, but now kind of wants to break free of that and start a career on Broadway, much to the chagrin of, everyone around him. It details his relationship with his producers, his daughter, and how his life is just spiraling out of control.
Brilliant. And it's worth noting, as always, we will be discussing both films in detail, which will include spoilers. And both of these films have some, more Birdman than 1917, have some good surprises. So be warned. If you haven't seen them and you don't want that journey to be spoiled, pause this episode and come back and listen when you've seen both films. All right, let's jump in. Who wants to start?
So the reason, obviously, that we put these two films together is the startling, although now not exactly commonplace, but less original idea of having many or one continuous shot throughout the film. It goes without saying, and we all know this, and we would have known it before we saw the film, that because it is physically impossible to shoot a 2-hour movie all in one go, that actually it's the effect, isn't it, of one continuous shot, rather than the technical prowess of that actually being a thing. But I just want to say, back in 2014, when I went to see Birdman, I did not know that that's how it was shot. And I went in to a press screening, so there was no talk about this film. And I remember the way that it starts, thinking, oh, good, I love a long take, I do, I like this, I'll see how long it goes. And then it went on and on and on and on, and I burst with excitement. And I remember, at the end of the film, I breathed. And I feel as though I had held my breath throughout the whole film. So therefore it was hugely affecting. I gave it probably 6 stars out of 5 and thought it was utterly brilliant. And that was the effect of that in Birdman. For me, knowing that 1917 was that way, it reduces some of the kind of wow factor, but actually it doesn't, because then when you watch 1917, you think, holy mackerel, how'd they do that? And isn't it stunning? So that's my podcast.
I love Birdman. I loved it when it came out, and I loved it rewatching it this week. Obviously, the actorly connection,
yes.
The whole theatre space, and going in and out of Broadway, both on stage and backstage and on the street, is something quite thrilling. And a lot of those characters and personalities, I've known lots of people like that, and
they're familiar tropes, aren't they? Yeah,
absolutely. But the long shot made perfect sense to me. It's the sense of theatre being in real time, being being tangible and things being affected by the environment and having to change and shift. And it makes sense to me in that story why it is a single shot. In fact, it's not a single shot. It cuts. There's a cut near the end of the film, I think, where he shoots himself.
Yeah.
There's multiple, and at the start of the film as well, there's a couple of cuts as well of a comet landing, and a shot of jellyfish and things, which become clear as the film goes on. But it was just a wonderful experience, and I guess the other couple of films that I think of, and between Birdman and 1917 is one is Gravity and the use of long takes in that, which is Alfonso Cuarón, one of his things.
Yep.
And he employs that to great effect with the first 15 minutes of that film.
Yeah.
But he talks about when he was making that movie, the technicians coming to him saying, "Oh, we can extend the shot. We could have a transition here. We can turn the camera here, and that'll." And he said, "No, that scene's over.
Yeah.
The shot ends because that's where the tension ends."
Nice.
And so, whilst Birdman, it made total sense to me, and I agree with you, it has that sense of tension. I didn't love it in 1917. I felt that it was boring when the two guys were walking around at the start and you're just following them walking.
Right.
I thought this didn't need to be a long shot.
Right.
It was harrowing and I almost was like, oh, this is so tense in the scene with the cow and the plane and all that, which was brilliant. But there was just times where I thought, actually, I'd quite like to see what's going on in other parts of this scene and not just be stuck with this person.
Wish there was more like a Dunkirk rather than a 1917.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was my kind of take.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with you there, Jeremy. Like, I'll start with 1917, which I saw last night. So it's still pretty fresh, and I'm overall pretty disappointed by the movie, to be honest. It felt really video gamey, and not in a good way. I think do you guys remember Spielberg's Tintin movie?
Yeah. I loved it.
And there was that sequence
Yes.
where they're all looking for the scrolls, and it's this bravura, 3-minute single take.
Yes.
It's animated with a virtual camera.
Yes.
But everything is choreographed to utmost perfection.
Yes.
It's so thrilling, and
Yes.
by the end of it, you are gasping. And there are moments like that in 1917, but for the most part, it felt like a pretty weak narrative, to be honest, that was bolstered by this gimmick. And yeah, I agree, Jimmy. There's bits in it that didn't need to be in a single take. And they kind of cheat with time a little bit in places. And there is one cut, a very, very definite cut in there.
When he passes out.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that it then resumes with him and carries us on, gets away with it, doesn't feel so much like a cheat as, well, we've all passed out and now he's up and we carry on. So, but I hear what you're saying.
It reminds me actually a little bit of how they used some of the time dilation in that movie we all saw, Searching. Do you guys remember Searching?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And how some of that was in real time, but a lot of it, they used certain graphics on the computer to denote the passing of time.
Yeah, right.
Which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And then, I guess the movie does achieve a kind of dreamlike quality.
1917.
1917 does.
Yeah.
With one event going on to the next, which is very video gaming, but it felt like I was watching someone else play a video game.
Right.
And
Which is a very
that's
popular
boring.
pastime. No, look. People,
Well,
it's a
streamers.
huge thing on the internet, isn't it not? So, but okay. So watching them, maybe that's a new thing. Watching people watch 1917. But okay, yep.
Yeah.
All in one shot. No, okay, yep.
Whereas, Jimmy, you bring up Alfonso Cuarón, and I want to, take us all the way back to 2006 and the experience of watching Children of Men
Far out, Brussels
sitting on
sprout.
the edge of your seat.
Yes.
And those long takes, again, maybe it was just going in, as you say, not knowing there were going to be these long
Yes.
takes. But when the shot just keeps going and going and the chaos starts building and it all climaxes, it's amazing.
And
it's incredible.
And the tension ends when it needs to
When
end.
it needs to
Yes.
end.
Because the other film I was going to bring up, the other film that Alfonso Cuarón has brought out in between these two films, which is Roma. And there's that similar moment as well. There's a number of moments in Roma, but the one at the end in the ocean, it's just like, how did he do this?
Yes,
and
that's
then,
right.
But the moment, it has its tension, and then that part of the story moves on.
And her walking down the street, and then the camera going up into the shop. Or there are lots of beautiful, glidey, continuous takes. So yeah.
Speaking of glidey, 1917 does have very, very glidey camera movements.
Yes.
Astonishingly so in places. I love how one of its magic tricks is that it puts the camera oftentimes in these very crowded environments.
Yes.
Full of, what looks like 500 extras.
Yes.
And somehow manages to maneuver this magic floating camera so it doesn't bump anyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't get obscured by everything. Everything is perfect. And I don't know if that's digital trickery or... I read in places where they erased some cranes and some scaffolding, but holy moly, that hand shot footage and that all those the rigs and the dollies, amazing
and
stuff.
Steadicam, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think that, you've mentioned the word choreography, and for me, this whole art form of the continuous shot is about the choreography, and we'll get onto that particularly in Birdman. But that's what I imagine. You're so right. We're in a tiny little narrow trench, as you say, ridden with extras. I got to say, I thought to myself, what a bum to be that guy, because now we pass him and we'll never see him again. The little dude on the left or the right or whatever who has to look pale-faced and sad for a moment, and then his seconds are over. But absolutely right. You can imagine just the being behind the rig, and it's like, okay, you're out, quick, move, ready to you. Are you ready to move on? But I just think that would be astonishing.
The one that impressed me the most is that scene with the soldiers singing to the battalion, and one of the lead characters comes in and just sits down.
Yes.
The camera sort of sweeps around and
Yes.
then comes through them on the
Yes.
ground. I was like, how did they do
Yeah,
this?
that's right.
I think this my sort of 3-word review of 1917 is meh. Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
Meh, except for him. Because
Yeah.
the work that he did is incredible, and nothing has impressed me more. Well, one of the most impressive things I've seen in a long time was that sequence when he wakes up, and just the flares and the light and the... it reminded me of Skyfall, actually, of the final sequence of Skyfall, which he also looked after, but... with Sam Mendes. But my gosh, that sequence alone deserves any awards thrown at Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
He's deserved them for years. But what's your thoughts on Birdman? Because
I love Birdman. Again, as with you guys,
You loved it the second time?
when it came out in 2014. Loved it when I saw it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, right.
You guys are absolutely right. The gimmick is used for an absolute purpose. It is there. It's thrilling, but it also really shows just the spiraling of Riggins' mind, and how this is putting us, the audience, in his shoes, right? And there are some sequences in it that are more inventive, more thrilling, more funny, more scary than any action movie or horror movie or flat out comedy that's out there. I'm thinking specifically right now of the scene where he gets stuck outside the theater. Another moment of how did they do that?
Yeah.
There's no change in focus on the camera. The lighting is perfect. You go from backstage to a rainy alleyway to Times Square where there's 500 extras.
Yeah.
To Broadway, back into the theater, back on stage. It makes this huge loop. This is just a magic trick, and we are along for the ride, and it's amazing.
One of the things that Birdman does, which I only realised whilst watching it after seeing 1917, is that whilst Michael Keaton's character, Riggin, whatever his name is, whilst he's the lead, we get to see the lives of the other people as well, and the camera weaves its way through, and we see little snippets.
Yeah.
And there's a number of scenes that are with other characters, and so it gives us a break from his story, and it gives us more context. It allows for more intense setups that are the work that would have to happen in real life is happening behind the scenes, and then we come into it. Whereas 1917, we never leave those two young men.
Yeah.
And I think that brings into the film a mundaneness that you could argue it's World War One, but equally I'm like,
I think, I'll respond to that, but I just wanted to, with your Riggin point, I think, and it is beautifully handled that we actually, as you say, get the fleshed outness of his sort of the supporting characters in his world. And then there's that delightful feeling when somebody walks back in shot, like Ed Norton, who miraculously goes from being drunk on stage and smashing the place up and eating chicken, and then suddenly he's sober and they're walking down the hallway and he's like, look, you just have to run with it, blah, 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 But I love that sort of segueing moments and scenes in Birdman. And you've sort of alluded to this, Jeremy, that the theatre is absolutely the right place for it, because in a play, there are no cuts. There are no edits and there are no retakes. And so, yes, it feels really, really apposite. To be fair, though, to Mendes, or whoever came up with, well, it was Mendes, obviously, who came up with the idea in 1917, one of the things I like a lot about the film, and I gave it 4 stars, not a million like Birdman, but I did appreciate it, but I didn't love it. I liked that he used 2, well, I call them newcomers. I know that we've seen their faces, and you've mentioned, Jeremy, that they're other dudes from Game of Thrones, which means many people will know him better than I. But ostensibly, they are not Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Firth, Mark Strong, and the dude from...
Game of Thrones.
And the other dude from Game of Thrones.
Richard Madden.
Do you know what I mean? Oh, and no, Richard Madden, but also the other guy who's from Fleabag.
Andrew
Scott.
Scott,
And he's amazing.
Hot Priest.
Right.
He was, to be honest, the moment he came in the film, I was like, oh, this is actually interesting.
Yeah.
He's so charismatic.
Yeah.
But then he gets his one scene and then that's that. But I actually thought, that's kind of a nice way of doing it, that we're following 2 young lads, likeable and warm and charismatic and who had a nice chemistry, I thought, in order to sort of want to follow them through their story.
Benedict Cumberbatch was a nice surprise as well, because I might have seen in a trailer that he was in it, but I'd forgotten. And I just hadn't expected that this general would be anyone of any note. And I was like, oh, that's quite cool.
Yeah. But you see, after we'd had a smidgen of Colin Firth and a smidgen of Mark Strong, I guess. But I like that way round of doing it.
I don't know, Sarah. I'm gonna fight you on that one.
I'm not going to debate you, Jimmy.
But I really felt that this casting of big name actors and bit parts just completely took me out of the movie. Like, oh, it's Mark Strong. It's Rob Stark.
Right.
Oh, it's Hot Priest. Every time it happened, especially with Benedict Cumberbatch, it's like, oh my god, it's Benedict Cumberbatch, and he's playing the exact same character he's playing in Warhorse. Like, that's. I'm the, kind of haughty, step upper crust general.
Yeah.
I did not like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I really like the 2 leads. I think they're fantastic. And there's just great chemistry and great overall, it's camaraderie, but it's also, it's pain, it's sacrifice, it's good stuff. And then you have Mark Strong come in and say, I recognize that voice. Oh, it's Mark Strong.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, guys, like, not...
No,
huge fan of
totally
that
fair
stuff.
enough. Totally. And I don't want it to win the Oscar for Best Picture.
Well, let's talk about this, because
I
I'm
want Ford
generally...
versus Ferrari! Oh my god!
No, you don't.
No, I don't. Why is it even on the list?
I mean, we may do another Oscar podcast. I guess that's a discussion to be had soon. But I'm overall, I fully agree with the criticisms that the Oscars is overly white, overly conservative, and it's sort of been this conversation that's been going on for a long time over the last couple of years, and it's just, man, the films that are nominated this year, what a missed opportunity.
You have a World War One and a World War Two movie. It's amazing.
Wait, what's the World War II one?
Jojo Rabbit.
But at least Jojo Rabbit has some spontaneity about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's not a Best Picture film. And I know that this is a whole different podcast, maybe, but...
but if 1917 wins, boo
Yeah,
to the
boo, man, boo. You know what will win is Para-Frickin' Sight.
I hope so.
And man, do not relegate that to flippin' Best Foreign Film.
It was Best International Film now, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
So I rewatched Parasite this week with some work colleagues who'd never seen it in a wonderful surround sound setup. It was one of the greatest experiences still. It's so brilliant. It's such a brilliant film. But back to 1917.
Yeah.
I have to back up what William, you said about the premise. I was so underwhelmed. In fact, I was talking to my colleague, and we were talking about just generally being unexcited about 1917 because it just seemed like another war film that wasn't necessarily adding anything new to the conversation. I mean, at least with Dunkirk, you had a structure that was so compelling and such a joy to unpack that helped elevate what was being discussed. And it was about having to wait and being, there's some new themes and ideas in there. But 1917, how many films have we seen a couple of people going on a mission and then the story being, war sucks. War destroys us. War's inhumane.
But do you still feel that, having seen it?
Absolutely.
Despite the continuous shot?
Yeah.
Because for me, it was about immersion. I know it's an overused phrase, really, but I feel as though literally following them through the trench. I mean, look, that bit where they go over into no man's land, and there's the situation with the cut in his hand and the corpse and the rat.
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff.
That's pretty amazing.
It's fantastic.
I definitely, those moments.
And I didn't want that cut, by which I don't mean I didn't want it cut out. I mean, I didn't want actual shots or scenes. I liked that whole thing of he's still got the bandage on his hand and it's gone in the water. I was so preoccupied with him rinsing that off, I have to say. But
well, when he got the brandy, I thought he would disinfect.
yeah, I was like, please,
there was
disinfect your
something,
hand.
but also there's a lot of tropes. Like, it really frustrated me that the only female character, well, there's two female characters, right? Because one of them was a baby, but the only woman in the whole film tends to his wounds.
Yeah.
I was like, boo!
Oh, sure.
Boo!
And that was just, I guess, part of the video game-ness of it. Like,
Sure, it does.
You know,
It hits all the beats.
If this was a first-person World War One
Yeah.
shooter, there would be the cutscene with the French girl and underground. There would be the cutscene of him floating down the river. It really felt like one thing after another in sequence. Sorry, which is a movie.
Yeah, that's right.
But in a way that was strangely, it felt disconnected and felt like I wasn't as excited as I should have been.
There's a few films that this reminded me of. So one was Revenant, and that it's that kind
love
of harrowing
Revenant.
journey. But I enjoyed Revenant.
Now, is that
much
Iñárritu or
more.
Cuarón?
That's Iñárritu.
Good.
Yeah.
I was going to say I'm so racist. I'm just ignorant, really. But okay, those two. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's a brilliant film, Revenant. I do feel like it gets ridiculous when he falls over the mountain with the horse and still survives and then lives in the horse for a bit. But brilliant film, but it sort of reminded me of that, but kind of not as good. Like, it wasn't as good a version of like man against nature and the environment, whether the environment's
gosh,
war.
no.
The other film obviously is Saving Private Ryan, where there's like a familial connection and there's this mission to go and do this thing, which again, not as good as Saving Private
But also
Ryan.
that shot, may I just say, the shot in 1917 where the camera goes over all of the bodies, the dead bodies and the bloody water, reminded me of Saving Private Ryan. And then George Mackay is crawling up the
Another
thing.
good moment.
Oh, yeah,
Horrific
really.
good moment. And
Yeah.
just him crying, I thought was quite humanizing.
Yeah.
And then the other film that it reminds me of is Apocalypse Now, which is one of my top 2 favorite films of all time. And that you've got this mission that's presented, particularly the Colin Firth scene, is very much like the Harrison Ford scene in Apocalypse Now. But again, it's
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford has got a small scene in Apocalypse Now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And he's part of the team that briefs Willard on his mission to go up the river. So, but again, not as good as Apocalypse Now. So I just sort of came away. Well, I went into that film expecting a pretty average war film, and that's exactly what I got, with some amazing sequences.
Yeah.
But I am not convinced that it's adding anything of meaning to a discussion about war.
No. Oh, no.
So it's purely for cinematic purposes and to show what we can do now with cinema.
That's with technology.
Yeah,
That's all
yeah.
I got from it, and that's fine. Like the story was engaging enough. That was fine. I couldn't have cared less about Richard Madden, unfortunately. But sorry about that. But
what
sorry
about
about
his trembly lip?
No, not even. But without that shot, without the continuous shot sort of effect, no, it wouldn't have been worth watching at all. So I don't know.
But then I think about something like Dunkirk, which was another film that did remind me of, being that it's a recent war film. And Dunkirk did, by all intents and purposes, kind of is similar in that it has a gimmick.
But
yeah,
so effective.
So effective, because I think the gimmick was so much more woven into the
And it
message
had Mark
of the story.
Rylance. There's your
Yeah.
problem. If you don't cast Mark Rylance, yeah.
And that shot as well. And I was watching a video the other day with possibly with Quentin Tarantino discussing with somebody about that shot in Dunkirk, where the character's holding his hands over his head, and there's the explosions going off one by one, and you're seeing people being cast asunder. That in itself is again a far more impressive version of the shot in 1917, where the guy's running and there's like the rugby team running past him,
which is a strange setup. I don't know, because the trenches didn't look that crowded, and plus I kept thinking he'd be bayoneted by one of the dudes.
In 1917?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're all like rushing forward
Yeah.
towards enemy lines with bayonets sticking out, and he's like running in front of them.
See, I loved that. I did love that scene at the end where he is running, and the men are coming over the ridge. I'm sure there's a technical term, and they are hurtling across him. And I feel that when I cross the corner of Victoria and Queen Streets on the crossing. And I have always, since university years, I have always made it my policy to just keep going, but I am the one. I will dodge people, but I will never stop. And I don't know, it's a game that
I love
like
this, your
to
policy.
play. It is
I have a policy.
No, but it's
I love
not
it.
in a I'm just going in a you better get out of my way. I reckon if we all just did it, with my expert driving skills, would just be able to keep on going, but I never stopped. That's how I felt when George Mackay was running towards me. Bombs are going off, and the people are the soldiers are hurtling over the ridge and all that sort of thing. I thought that was really cool. And when one of them bowls him over, because that's what would happen, and he gets up and keeps going, I thought that was really great.
Well, that's probably a good segue to come back to that point about choreography and Birdman, because they rehearsed that, I think, for 6 weeks. They rehearsed that whole
really?
thing. And of course, they had to have it tight,
Yes.
both in script and in action, because they couldn't edit anything out
No.
in post. But I just, there's some wonderful moments. And like you said, William, the lighting and also the focus is so on point. And I'm just thinking of one moment where I can't remember which character it is, whether it's Riggins' ex-wife, whether it's his current girlfriend, or whether it's Naomi Watts, who's wonderful, by the way. She leaves his dressing room and she's walking down the hallway, and there's a door in the foreground, and it opens, and Edward Norton sort of pokes his head out,
Yeah.
sort of farcically almost.
Yeah.
There's some great moments in
So the
that.
thing that I noticed the second time round with Birdman, and I enjoyed it slightly less, but I think it was because I found the characters more annoying this time. Because apart from Edward Norton, who I just think is brilliantly, arrogantly, spectacularly fantabulous, some of the others I found Emma Stone a bit annoying as a character. I found Lindsay Duncan as the critic. Who, dared to say, I'm going to close your play and all that. It was all just a bit eh. But anyway, that's fine. But anyway, the thing that I noticed technologically this time round, obviously knowing the continuous shot thing, was how many times it would there would be a quick pan to somebody down a corridor who's been eavesdropping, and then they'd cut back, and that's where those cuts happen.
Yep.
So then I started, how there was that article that with the editor of Birdman, who said however many cuts you think there are many, many more. And I started to go, oh yeah. And then Emma Stone goes into a darkened corridor. Oh, there's another, da-da-da. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be all like, oh, well, I can see where all the cuts are, and that diminishes it at all. But I just was more present to them this time round. I would find it harder to do that in 1917, to be fair, even though there are obviously heaps of cuts. So, did you know, just talking very quickly about the way that they cut 1917, one thing I was really impressed by is that interview with the interview with the editor, who said that looking at the dailies each day, he and Sam Mendes would figure out what they had shot, and they shot mostly in sequence, didn't they? And then my mate Sam, would shoot the next day according to what they had got that far, because they weren't going to go back and reshoot anything, but it would be like, oh, if this is the way that this is looking, and this is the tone, and this is the angle we had on their face, and that's where we'll go from now, which is, I think, a really unusually organic way to create a film, I would have thought.
I like that. I do like that. I think that process is quite nice. It's just a shame the story wasn't better.
But interesting though, hey, taking what you've got and going, okay, well, this is how this feels now, and so therefore, how about making it more and that sort of thing. Whereas Birdman, I'm incredibly impressed that they rehearsed that, as you say, 6 weeks.
I know what you're saying about some of the annoyances. I feel the same with it. I love Emma Stone as a performer, and I loved her character when I first watched it. But they're very neurotic, which I guess is all part of the kind of intensity of that story, isn't it? They're sort of taking themselves far too seriously. I think the most level-headed and lovely character is his ex-wife, who comes in.
Amy Ryan, isn't
Amy
it?
Ryan
Yeah.
is just wonderful.
Yes.
She was in a film recently that I saw, Late Night, with Emma Thompson.
I didn't bother to
and-
see that.
Mindy
And Mindy Kaling?
Mindy Kaling. It's
Looked
pretty underbaked in terms of its story and script.
Yeah.
But it's completely saved by the charisma of Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling. They
Right.
just lift the whole film. But Amy Ryan plays the villain in that piece, and she's wonderful. And I've actually forgotten who she was.
She
I know
used
who
to be
this is.
fantastic and in everything. And probably up until Birdman, she was sort of much more of a person.
Yeah, much more of a person.
No, sorry, but I mean much more of a name. You know,
Yeah.
you'd get Amy Ryan in something.
Yeah,
and she
true.
disappeared for a while.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Birdman, with all the neuroticism and talk about social media and everything, watching it now in 2020 also just seems like such a horrific view of our present. Did you guys get that? Like, all the talk about Twitter, or when Michael Keaton is out in Times Square in his undies, and like there's just a horde of people following him with their cell phones, and that was 2014, and it feels like this is just the norm now. And it seems strangely prescient. Like it's this nightmare society where everyone's disconnected. Everything's a flash in the pan, and everything is about viral virosity.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I didn't love that, but I definitely felt that as well with the oversaturation of superhero films and the whole commentary on that. And I also thought as well, this judgment of art only being worthwhile if it is real. And Edward Norton's obsession of real. And I also felt that as well with the critic character and her high art opinions of theatre. And I just think there's all these different opinions and neuroses that have just exacerbated by what you've just talked about, which is social media and the new wave of how we consume media.
The thing is, in 2014 or 13, if that's when he wrote it, that was a satire. And the same with the Lindsay Duncan critic. Her suddenly giving the play a rave review because it reaches reality, because he shoots his face off. You know what I mean? It's clearly satirical because it's absurd. But I think that's what's so alarming, is that in 2014, we didn't know it was prescient, but it was. And it will have felt like a really satirical commentary. And now it's just the norm.
Yeah.
That, I hear you, William. That's what's so sad, is we're like, yeah.
Now you have Scorsese's, talk about Marvel movies and people rallying against that, and it's like something straight out of Birdman.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. That just talking about the critic. There's a shot in that film that just blows my mind, and I don't know how they did it. Which is that shot where I mean, it's all one shot, right? But when it sweeps out to the audience,
Yeah, and she gets up and
and you can see her. There is an audience full of people.
Yeah.
You see her. And
stand up and walk out.
No, but even before that, you can see her sitting there, and then everybody stands up. She's sitting there, and then you see her walk out. But my eye was on her the whole time.
That's interesting. Yeah.
How did they do that? Is it to do with her the fact she's the only person wearing a certain color? I couldn't see any discernible.
I don't know if it's a subtle focus thing. Sometimes, obviously, they use lighting in a particular way, don't they? But I think often for me, it's focus. Is that. I will be suddenly conscious that I'm looking at someone in the background because I'm meant to be noticing them, and I think, oh, that's clever. They forced my eye, but I'm.
In that moment, I was looking for costume, I was looking for lighting, and I was looking for probably focus as well. I couldn't see anything.
Right.
The only thing was maybe she was the only person wearing glasses or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's something there that they have done, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I need to go back and rewatch it a few times.
Or Google it, because there will be somebody in Hollywood who is paid to come up with the thing that will draw the audience's focus to someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
So talking about, I guess, the conversation about Best Picture winner. This did win Best Picture, and I think I've looked back. I'm currently doing my top films of the decade and trying to figure out what that looks like and what films are.
It's basically just 2014. I think
Yeah.
we've agreed.
Yeah. 2015. My two top films come from 2015.
All right.
But anyways, looking back at the Best Picture winners of this decade, it's pretty damn depressing.
Yeah.
You've got Birdman and Moonlight. I think that's pretty much the only films that I'm comfortable with. Is there anything else you can think of that's won Best Picture that?
I haven't got the list in front of me. I can't remember.
Jeremy, Green Book.
Was that only last year?
That was only last year.
Wow.
So The Shape of Water, which I just...
I thought that was a fun Best Picture winner. It's not Best Picture, but
No.
I'm glad
But
they
at
gave
least
it
they
to
went
that.
there. Yeah.
It was a
else have we got?
Fishman movie, and they give it Best Picture.
Yeah.
Can we go through? Do you mind? I mean,
Wait, The Artist, which is just...
The Artist.
I love The Artist. And look, I mean, I am probably one for a bit of a gimmick. And so it was the first time we'd seen a black and white silent in French and blah, blah. I thought that was a cute, innovative, also quite a meta sort of Best Picture winner, because it is all about the film industry. God forbid Once Upon a Time in Hollywood wins Best Picture, but it's not going to, is it?
Oh, I actually think it could, because it's
I
that
think
whole
we all
self-fascination with
The golden
with
age.
golden, but also just cinema, like Hollywood loves congratulating itself, which
Yeah.
is why the artist one, right?
Yes, but that was then. This is now. Surely everybody knows that that's just how Quentin rolls, and we like, and good for you. And
But they'll give it to him as a legacy award, right? He's never won a Best Picture. It'll be that film.
It'll be like,
I'm quite
this is
comfortable
his
with that.
ninth. Oh no.
Yeah, we need to give
What
it
if
the
his
last
10th
one.
is rubbish? We
Yeah.
better
What if
give
his
it
10th
to
is
him
Star
now.
Trek?
Or Kill Bill 3.
Oh,
They're not going to give
jeez.
Kill Bill 3 a Best Picture. Okay, so Hurt Locker. Wah, wah.
Okay.
A good
Oh,
film.
really?
That was
I thought
worthy,
it was,
yeah.
It was
Oh,
fine.
is it?
It was super tense.
Wasn't
Oh,
it
I
directed
remember.
by a woman?
Yeah.
So
This is true. And like as Amy Poehler and Tina Fey says, it's a film about torture. And in terms of torture, I trust the woman who spent 3 years married to James Cameron.
yeah, that's right.
Well, would you rather Avatar or Hurt Locker? I mean,
Oh my
come
god,
on.
Avatar makes me want to barf.
I didn't love Avatar when it came out, but I've gone back and watched it.
I have not.
I really like
I've
it.
never watched
and
it
I'm really
since.
excited about the new ones.
What?
Lord.
Woo!
Oh my God.
Okay, The King's Speech was 2011.
Oh, boy. That's got to be the bottom of the barrel.
No,
I
it
think.
doesn't.
I do
King's
not like
Speech
that movie.
was marvelous, and it was British, and I think that must have been when they decided to actually give Best Picture to maybe a film that wasn't American, so that
2012, sorry, was The Artist, as we've discussed. 2013 was Argo.
Oh yeah.
That's a film I forgot existed.
Yeah.
It was
That was
okay.
pretty good.
2014 was 12 Years a Slave, which is a film I hate with a burning passion.
Yeah, that was a really good film.
Yeah, I just find it horrible, and I love Gravity so much, and that should have won.
Yeah, Gravity totally should have won.
2015 was Birdman. Mm-hmm. 2016 was Spotlight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
No,
good.
but again, they're all issues movies.
Yeah, they're a bit boring. 2017 is Moonlight, not La La Land,
Which is also an issues movie.
but it's
But it's good that it wasn't La La
beautiful.
Land.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh, look, it's a
beautiful
wonderful film. I actually loved Spotlight and gave that 5 stars back
Yeah,
in the
Spotlight
day.
is
but
great.
but
I
I've never
love, like,
wanted to watch it
process
again.
movies.
Yeah.
And then the other ones are the ones we've discussed. So The Shape of Water, and
Green
then
Book.
Green Book.
Which is an abomination.
Oh, and it's
Feel good.
and it's like in terms of a film about race, there was so many better options that year. Like you had, I haven't seen Black KKK Klansman, but I know you didn't like it,
No.
Sarah. But you were quite. You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it. No.
But there was that film by Spike
None of
Jonze.
us liked it, don't worry.
Okay, well I've seen it.
joking.
There was Roma, which was in my mind the best picture
Yeah.
winner, but they're never going to give it to it because it's Netflix.
Yeah.
And then there was something else that year as well, which I can't remember.
Are you talking about last year?
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. So we shall see if 1917 is going to be the one that takes the cake.
Can we just finish off real quick talking about music?
Yes.
Because I think music is effective in both movies. Absolutely. Thomas Newman's score is amazing. It's so rare for, this day and age to have a score like that. But it's very classical, very traditional. It swells in the right places. It's dead silent, or the soundscape at least is dead silent in others. Like that moment where they first go over the parapet into no man's land, and the camera kind of whoosh, and then the music kicks in. Oh, so good. Chills. Chills,
I
man.
agree. I absolutely agree. And I didn't know it was Thomas Newman. And I always, whenever I love music in films, which is often because I think music is such a massive part of how good a film is. I was really, really surprised it was a Thomas Newman score. And I loved, again, I loved that whole sequence with the flares and the music there is so kind of sort of spooky and almost science fiction-y.
You see the silhouettes of enemy soldiers, and they just run towards them. Like, holy moly, this is really intense.
The big burning building and just the strangeness, and it's almost like it's underwater, and there's this sort of I just like the sound of sort of wheeling around like a great.
So how many stars would you have given 1917 if you had to give star rating out of 5?
It's a 3-star film for me.
Really? So all that and yet only 3. What about you, William?
Yeah, probably 3.
Holy mackerel.
Because I just feel that whilst the technical stuff was wonderful, it was so underwhelming in every other aspect.
Okay.
And then, of course, Birdman with its percussive score, which is... It's so unique. It ties the whole thing together so beautifully. And it's been imitated, many, many times since. There's again, going back to video games. Have you guys heard of a game called Ape Escape? No. What's it called? It's called Ape Out.
No.
Ape Out. Maybe I'll show you a video afterwards. But it's basically the opening titles of Birdman as a video game. with a drum score that kind of reacts to how you play, and it's just it's spontaneous and it's crazy and it's neurotic. Completely the character of the movie just brought forth in music.
I think one of the cleverest things about the Birdman score was the fact that you hear the drums and then all of a sudden it becomes diegetic.
Yes.
And there's the dude. Now, when the dude is on the street and they're walking past him, I was like, oh yeah, he's busking. That's really cleverly done.
It's so cool.
And then later on, it's less credible because they're within the theatre and Regan's walking out, isn't he? Walks past and down a corridor and the camera pans that way because they need a cut. Jokes, not jokes. And there's the drummer, in there, and that seems a bit, less realistic. But that was nicely done. I found it very discomforting, the music, and that's obviously part of it. Yeah, that's right.
Strange.
I agree. I loved the music in both films and that percussion. And interestingly, that the film was not allowed to be entered into the Best Original Score in the Oscars because they use classical music in there as well. That was deemed adding to the emotional effect of the film and therefore was not eligible as an original score.
Right.
But it won every other flippin' score award and it was just wonderful. But in terms of like that piece you talk about, Sarah, of the mixing of what is real and what is not. Which again is wonderful in a film that's obsessed with realism, but in terms of the characters are obsessed with it, but it's just the film itself is not. There's some wonderful moments where that blurs. Like I love the flying scene. I'd forgotten where he's flying and he lands and he walks in, and then the cab driver's chasing after him for money.
Yeah.
And you've got the moments where you are questioning all the time what is real and what's not real. Like there's the homeless man screaming the Shakespeare and I think is it the porter speech
That's
from
Bill
Macbeth?
Camp, I realised this time round.
I recognised him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I now say what he was from? No. But you'd totally know him if you look back on him. Yeah.
And then he goes, "Am I giving it too much?"
Yeah,
Like,
I
he
did it
asked
just
to-
for you.
Yeah, and so it's that whole piece is so wonderfully woven into the tone of the film. And the other thing I'll say is that, and we've alluded to this, that Birdman doesn't profess to being in real time.
No.
Even though it's in a continuous shot, there's a number of moments. Like the most notable one is when Ryan Gosling. It could have been Ryan Gosling for all I know. Edward Norton.
Doesn't Edward Norton shout at him? Why don't you just
Yeah.
get Ryan Gosling?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Edward Norton and Emma Stone are sort of making out in the rafters, and then the camera kind of pops over, and Edward Norton's in the scene
That's
below,
right.
and so there's a lot of moments like that, or the camera going through the TV screen is another transition.
And I hadn't noticed it the first time I saw it, but this time I noticed that we go from Riggin basically and it's the night before the preview, but he's not dressed up and ready to go, and he's ranting about whatever it is, and then he walks down the corridor, and then he's in his costume and he goes out and the play's already underway, and suddenly Andrea Riseborough's already there on stage in costume doing her thing. So it must have been, actually it's just after she said, "I'm pregnant with your child." Yes, there are some very interesting surreal leaps in time, aren't there?
And also there's the call for him to come down for second act, and
That's
there's like
right.
one tiny scene, and then that's the end of the play. So I'm like, there must be more that's going on there as well.
Yes, I hadn't realised the first time. I think I was so much like, is this still one take? that I hadn't quite twigged how many leaps there were and quite all the surrealist sort of moments. Because I'm sure that's not Michael Keaton in the mirror at the end, is it? With the busted up face. I think that's another actor, but I didn't get round to having a look and checking.
I think it's just a fake nose, isn't it?
Oh,
I thought it was prosthetics.
It's more than that, because the guy has the same mouth as the guy in the Birdman suit, which is not Michael Keaton's
Yeah, that's
mouth
Michael
or
Keaton.
voice.
That is Michael
Is it
Keaton.
actually?
It's a CGI, pretty de-aged version of his jaw, but it looks like
Looks
him.
really different. When he's chasing him down the street, I mean, it would make sense, obviously, that it was him, and you could do that, but no, for some reason I thought that it wasn't. But okay.
And before we wrap up, I just want to mention Zach Galifianakis is brilliant.
so good.
Naomi
The most
Watts
serious
is
we've ever
brilliant.
seen.
So good.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in this film, their
Edward
performances are
Norton's
just impeccable.
amazingly narcissistic.
And his character is as well, isn't it? So,
No, I meant that. I love him. I thought that was brilliant.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed the episode, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can find us on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, and Stitcher. You can also subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, which are great places to let us know what you think of the films discussed in this episode, as well as give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then, all together,
Ka kite anō.